Welcome to The Criminologist, the podcast dedicated to educating and entertaining our listeners. We bring you subject matter experts from around the world and share the latest and greatest evidence-based practices and interventions to help individuals desist from a life of crime and delinquency. We do so by painting an accurate picture of that journey from the perspective of the justice-involved individual. Too often, our perceptions of those individuals are tainted by media-driven caricatures created to sell newspapers or movie tickets. This adds little to a healthy dialogue as to how to best address criminality and the reintegration process. This podcast avoids stereotypes and biases in favor of the lived experiences of those we can best learn from. Now please, welcome the host of The Criminologist, Joseph Arvidsson.
Oh. And welcome to episode 84 of the Criminologist podcast. Happy to have you all with us today. We spend plenty of time on this program talking about change. We talk about change primarily in the context of the clients we serve. I like to frame it as the journey or the pathway that the justice-involved individuals are on, and what we as professionals or even volunteers can do in helping clients navigate those pathways. Of course, we also talk about the importance of implementation and of how, at the end of the day, it really is a parallel process. That is a dual process, not just that of the one that our clients are on, but also the ones that we as professionals are on. If we are to best serve our clientele, then we as practitioners need to grow and develop our skills as well. Again, folks, it is a parallel process. To that end, I have been reflecting on the journey that I have been on since launching this podcast 84 episodes ago. And in particular, the opportunities it has led to, which have truly augmented both my human capital and my social capital. I have met and had a chance to talk to so many fascinating people and to learn from those people thanks to this podcast. If you have been listening to the program as of late, then you are aware that I recently traveled to Barcelona to take part in the first international training school on core correctional skills. And for me, this was such a wonderful experience because of all the amazing people I met who traveled from all over Europe to take part in this learning experience. I want to introduce you to one of those individuals today, an incredible young man by the name of Sylwester Matkowski. Sylwester attended the school to learn more about core correctional skills, but for me, it was such an enriching experience spending a week with Sylwester and learning all about his experiences as to probation in his home country of Poland. Sylwester is earning his PhD, and some of his interests are working with juveniles and also looking at the role of our narrative scripts in the change process. As we know, those narrative scripts factor into the desistance process when we talk about changing the so-called condemnation script to a redemption script. Please enjoy a taste of my conversation with my friend, Sylwester Matkowski, joining us all the way from Poland, and I will see you all on the other side. Well, so good to see and talk to you again, Sylwester. As folks are about to hear, likely we crossed paths recently in Barcelona at the International Training School on Core Correctional Skills. But before we go there, why don't you start off, Sylwester, by telling our audience a little bit about yourself, your background, both educationally and professionally.
Hi, Joe. It's nice to hear you again. Hi, everyone. I'm Sylwester Matkowski, and I've got 4 years' worth of experience in Polish probation. Right now, I'm on my second year of doctoral studies at the University of Adam Mickiewicz in Poznań. I would like to send some greetings to my students listening to the podcast. We are the future of my country and our country, and be persistent and never lose interest in science and faith in other people. As for my professional background, I've been helping the juvenile probationers to thrive in their local communities by including them in many neighborhood programs and activities, and celebrating their reintegration into the community, which I will elaborate later on.
Give us sort of your diagnosis, if you will, of Polish probation. And again, you've alluded to this a bit already, but what's working with Polish probation, and in your opinion, what is missing?
Okay, so before we dig deep on what's going on in Polish probation, I will just shed some light on overall context of Polish probation. I will do it in three parts: hiring, training, and practices. Then I will move on to etiology of problems, so-called what is missing, and our resources, what works. I will try to keep it brief, not to bore our audience to death. As for general information, the Polish Probation Service is divided into two branches: family cases and adult affairs. I won't go into the details of their separate work because it would take too much time, but I will provide with the brief info on their responsibilities. According to the PO on probation, there is a gradation of tasks of Polish POs. The tasks are in a hierarchy of rehabilitative, diagnostic, preventive, and surveillance and control. I'm mentioning this though because this hierarchy of tasks should indicate the allotted time and resources for doing them. But actually, in practice, it's totally reverse. Probation's officer focus most on surveillance and control, while rehabilitative tasks fall short. I have some statistics prepared to depict the probation in Poland. We have two types of probation officers: over 5,000 professional and more than 20,000 community, sometimes called social, probation officers. The average probation officer in Poland is 43 years old female with 7 years of experience. And the two types I mentioned differ very much in hiring, training, and of course practices. So, going to hiring. To become a professional, you must fulfill a few requirements: have a Polish nationality, crystal clear character. How to measure that? I have no idea. And hold the title of masters from one of the following studies: pedagogy, sociology, law, or psychology. You also have to pass the exam from law and undergo a year of training. While if you want to become a community probation officer, all you need is a proof of secondary education and some experience in education or rehabilitation work. As the research shows, there is no scientific evidence behind this division. It's just some historical matters. In fact, it's just the opposite of science. According to the report from the Helsinki Foundation for Human Rights, the community POs in Poland, delivery of service varies among the knowledge and the skills they have. While there are many great community probation officers, most of them lack the qualification needed to work with probationers. According to the other research, the majority of cases, special cases like addictions, domestic abuse, that need some special competences from the probation officers are not in the qualifications of the community probation officers in Poland. I will give you an example from my daily work. To the probation attendance center I worked in, attended an openly gay 16 years old probationer. One time he confided in me that his community PO is encouraging the sexual orientation change program and accepting his father punishing homosexual relationships he had. The community PO was treating the homosexual orientation of this teen as a disorder and solidifying opinion of the father. This boy felt frightened, helpless, and betrayed, not only by his caretaker, but also by the formal representative of the justice system who spouted this nonsense. To sum things up, for the time being, there is no standardized criterion for hiring NPOs and their training, so qualifications differ greatly. Do you have any questions about the hiring, Joe?
No questions, Sylwester, as much as when you were replying to that question, it really does speak to the importance of hiring quality people, and again, the training, the importance of training in hiring quality probation officers and trying to implement evidence based practices.
Yeah, I will give the real life examples of why it's important. As for the training, the community probation officers sadly undergo no official training, Joe. They have no supervision. They are just introduced to the work and filling out the legal forms needed for the court. And the rest is, as the James Bond described it, a black box of the interactions between probation officers and their probationers.
Hey, what else can our listeners expect to hear from Sylwester Matkowski when he returns to the Criminologist podcast?
Well, I'll be talking about my research, about the doctoral thesis that I'm currently researching. As you mentioned the polyphony that I talked to you about before. I'm doing the research of the lost voices, the voices of the probationers, the polyphony of those voices that should allow for the probationers to choose and negotiate the options of self-identity. Because right now we have a hegemony of one main interpretation, or sometimes a cacophony of other views that do not come into any agreement. Those ideas are very important to all narratives of probationers, as we could have seen from the Liverpool study, where there were redemption scripts and condemnation scripts. I think that this study could bring very good testimonies for the other generations of the probationers to see, because right now in Poland we do not have any kind of testimonies, any kind of success stories from the juveniles. That's why I refer to them as a lost voices, and I would love to see them, to hear those voices being recognized, being acknowledged, and being reconciled within their local community. And that's what I actually try to do in my work.
Sylwester, I absolutely love studying comparative systems of justice. Although we see differences in systems, I also really enjoy hearing those universal themes. And we were able to hear some of those when you talked about hiring practices, training practices. And again, I really loved learning from you, particularly your passion around juvenile justice and your research into desistance and the role that our narrative scripts play in the change process. I want to continue this conversation with you very soon, my friend. Please promise me and my listeners that you will be back very soon and we can pick up this conversation right where we left off. Will you be back?
Yes, I promise you, I will come back. I will be back.
Sylwester, I'm already missing you and Barcelona and all the other great students we met. We'll talk soon, and hopefully we'll get some of those on board as well.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joe, very much.
Huge thank you once again to Sylwester Matkowski, joining us all the way from Poland. He will be back on the show to pick up this fantastic conversation that we were having with him. In the meantime, you may contact the show or reach out to us through our website, theparagongroup.llc.com, for training or presentations as to evidence-based practices or implementation, or of course, the topic of desistance from crime. If you have questions or comments as to this program, feel free to contact the show via our email at thecriminologistpodcast@gmail.com. That's thecriminologistpodcast@gmail.com. Remember to follow us through our Facebook page and Instagram page at The Criminologist Podcast. New fun images are being added all the time to those feeds. You don't want to miss out. The Criminologist Media Group is also on Twitter at Crim Media Group. That's CRIM Media Group. Go ahead and give us a follow on Twitter. You may also connect with me, Joseph Arvidsson, on LinkedIn, and follow both the Criminologist Podcast and the Paragon Group on our LinkedIn pages. Lastly, if you've not already done so, check out and subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Criminologist, for additional content as to the themes of this podcast. If you already follow us on social media, you've likely seen some of our criminologist refrigerator magnets popping up all over the world. If you're interested, simply reach out to the show. And if you believe in what we're doing on the program, if you are part of the movement, please spread the word. Tell a friend or a coworker or a colleague about us. Ask them to subscribe to the show. And of course, do so yourself if you've not already done so. And always remember, folks, there's no them, there's only us.
I'll be back. I'll be back. I'll be right back.
I will be back. I will be back. I will be back.
She'll be back.
The Criminologist Podcast is a production of the Paragon Group, LLC. For speaking engagements, interviews, program design, or training opportunities, please visit us at theparagongroup.llc.com. If you enjoyed the show, you can find more content and videos on our YouTube channel, The Criminologist. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Both the Criminologist Podcast and the Criminologist channel are brought to you by the Criminologist Media Group. Be sure to give us a 5-star review, and thanks for listening.
The thoughts, statements, and opinions of the host and cast members do not necessarily reflect the views of their employers and are those of the host and cast themselves. Any discussion regarding client statements, behaviors, actions, or crimes are purely fictional and are used only for the purposes of example. Any examples that could be deemed to be related to an actual individual or individuals are incidental.